Okay, although government has said that no new badger cull licences will be issued after this year, badgers can still be killed under the current licensing until 2025. Listeners will recall that we featured a few weeks ago the Cheshire Badger Vaccination programme with Elaine Alexander on the Northwich Now programme, and I'm delighted to say that she's returned to the studio, but this time accompanied by Richard Fryer, a local farmer. Elaine felt it would be interesting for our listeners to hear the farmer's side of the story as regards bovine tuberculosis, so Richard has kindly agreed to come into the Radio Northwich studio. Good afternoon, Elaine and Richard.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us back.
It's a pleasure. Thanks very much for being with us today. And Richard, I know you're particularly busy, so you've dived out in between milking, but it's good to have you here.
No problem.
Elaine, I came out with you a few weeks ago at the ungodly hour of 5 o'clock in the morning, and was surprised at how complex the whole operation is and how much care you have to take in carrying out this operation. For many people, this really is a very emotive subject, particularly the killing of badgers. And over 160,000 people have recently petitioned Parliament to actually stop the cull. Mike Amesbury, the MP for Northwich, is very supportive of what you're doing and said, I believe the vaccination of badgers and eventually of cattle, when the vaccine is developed, will be the key weapons in the fight against tuberculosis in our rural areas. Before I speak to Richard, perhaps, Elaine, you could remind our listeners what it is that the Cheshire Badger Vaccination Group actually do.
Thank you. Yes, so we are a group of trained volunteers, and our aim is to vaccinate badgers against bovine TB. And we do that to prevent the badgers getting bovine TB and therefore transmitting it to the cattle. But also it prevents the badgers getting the TB from the cattle as well, because that can be quite a vicious circle, that transmission between cattle and badgers.
So it can be a two-way thing, can it?
It can, yes. But by vaccinating the badgers, and obviously the cattle are regularly tested for TB, it just stops that transmission. And obviously Rich will explain the impact of TB on farmers later. But really, by vaccinating the badgers, it's a win-win. It's a win for the badgers because obviously they're not being culled and they're protected from TB. And it's a win for the farmers because it helps to have a protected population of badgers around their farm.
Okay, Richard, before we talk about your relationship with Elaine's group, perhaps you could tell the listeners a little about yourself and your farm.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we've farmed in Winsham for the family for well over 100 years. It's a family farm. We're dairy farmers. We have 230 cows plus about 110 young stock, over 320 acres. We're mainly grass-based. We like the cattle to be outside in the fields as much as they can. That's the way we choose to farm. And we produce and sell about 1.5 million litres of milk a year. I feel very lucky. I've never really wanted to do anything else other than farm. I knew when I was growing up and at school that's what I wanted to do. And most of the time I still love what I do. I still love working outdoors, working with the cattle. Great time of year this, April and May, two favourite months of the year, probably the season changing fast, all the hedges and the flowers coming out and longer days, more daylight hours, being outside more with the seeing and enjoying the wildlife on the farm.
Okay, I wonder if you could tell the listeners a little bit about what impact bovine tuberculosis, because I believe you've had it twice in the last few years from our conversation a little bit earlier. I wonder if you could tell the listeners a little bit about what the impact is like when the farm, you contract bovine tuberculosis, and what the impact's like, not just financially and with regard to the actual farm itself, but in personal terms as well.
Yeah, so we're in Cheshire, we're classed as an edge area, so we're that's a term that DEFRA give this area, in that we're not in a high risk area, but we're not in a low risk area either. We're in between.
Okay. So
that means that we're on 6 monthly testing. So every 6 months we have to test our herd. That's done over 2 days in 1 week. That's
the whole herd, is it?
Yeah. So
how many cattle do you have?
So about 340 at the moment.
So that's a major job in itself.
Yeah, it takes all day. So on the, say the Monday, they would come and one of the vets comes and clips the hair on the side of the cattle's neck, and two jabs, one above the other, like a little a skin test, if you like. That's what it's called.
Right.
And then on the Thursday that week, then they would come and read that test and see if the injection has reacted at all, to see if it's come up in a lump, and that is the test that, you know, when they come and run the hand over that, that's when they can feel, and that's what tells you if the cows have got TB or not. So that's the heart in your mouth kind of time.
I can imagine. Yeah. So what happened? You tested positive at the farm twice, I believe.
Yeah, so in 2017 was the first time, in May 2017, it was the first time we got TB. We were shut up then. It was a big shock. It was one of those things, we've been prepared for it because TB was becoming more prevalent in the area, but you're never really prepared for it until you hear that news from the vet. So that was a shock, and the first time you get it, you don't really know how difficult it is to deal with in terms of the movements, the restrictions on your business. So that was really difficult. You've got to test every 60 days instead of every 6 months until you're clear, and you need 2 clear tests before you are declared a TB-free herd again. So every 60 days, essentially, you've got to test all 340 animals.
And what happened as regards the business? Did you have to close down? I mean, obviously, I would imagine you're a dairy farm, so you supply milk, and probably you supply some of your stock for beef. I would imagine. What was the impact on that?
Yeah, so as I said, we're a dairy farmer, so our primary income is from selling milk. So in terms of that doesn't really change. Milk, when you buy it in the shops, in the supermarkets who we sell to, has been pasteurised. Yeah. So there's no issue at all there once milk is pasteurised. Okay. That can still be sold and it's perfectly safe. On the beef side, so we rear 60 replacements every year, so 60 Frisian heifer calves, and the other calves that are born, either the black and white bull calves or the Aberdeen Angus calves, we sell them to beef farmers. They rear them to beef. We're a specialist dairy farm. We haven't got the room or the time to be rearing those as well. Okay. There's been massive consolidation over the last, well, it's never stopped really, but certainly over the last 20 or 30 years of the farming industry. There's very few mixed farms anymore. People have specialised in either crops or cattle, and if you're cattle, usually you're a dairy farm or you're a beef farm. Things have just had to be streamlined really. So the calf sales, that they're really tricky. Not only you've not got the income from selling those calves to beef farmers, but because you're closed up with TB, you can't move them. So you've got the extra cost of rearing those calves, plus you've a limited number of buildings to keep these animals in as well. So that's probably the biggest pressure point, if you like, is when you've got all the calves and you've very little room to house them. You have to come up with ingenious ideas. You've got to house them in a welfare-friendly way, of course, and they've all got to be fed. So in terms of time pressures and logistics, that's really difficult, really.
So there's an immediate reduction in income and an increase in actual costs. That's what you're actually saying. That's
the thing.
So what was the financial implication then? Once you've been closed down. So if you don't mind me asking.
No, it's not a problem.
What's the financial implication?
So conservatively, between £20,000 and £30,000 each time we've been really shut up. Yeah, easily. And that's probably not really being adding in a true reflection of all the time it takes. With all the rounding up in the summer and running the cattle through the race to do the testing. That's more sort of in lost stock sales and extra feed that we've had to buy. So yeah. And
what about your quality of life? Surely that's got to be impacted big time.
For me, that's the biggest, by far the biggest.
Really?
Yeah, really. The financial side of it we've talked about and why, but it's the unknown really, the lack of clarity. Once you've gone down with TB, you don't know if or when you're going to go clear again. You've got animals leaving the farm. You've got all sorts of issues, paperwork, extra forms to fill in when you do want something to leave, and I think the things you can't really see, the worry. You'll have to excuse me. The sort of sleepless nights before a test, particularly, and just the effect it has on you. You know, your enjoyment in the job. You know, we do this job. It is a job. We have to make money. It's a business, of course. But you know, I've never wanted to do anything else, as I said, and you know, it makes you question whether you want to carry on farming at all. It's that massive. It has been on me. It's certainly, you know, the hardest thing I've had to deal with in agriculture, really, by far. And you know, in the last few years, we've had a pandemic, as everyone knows. We had a drought in 2018. Our milk buyer went bust in 2019. You know, nearly £50,000 worth of loss there. But the TB is by far and away the biggest thing we've had to deal with.
I think from the tone of your voice, our listeners can probably tell how emotive a subject it is. And thanks for opening your heart to everybody. How did you first? I mean, Elaine's here. I don't know which one of you want to answer this. How did you first come to start liaising together? You know, the farmer with the Badger Vaccination Group, which to a lot of people, I would imagine who are listening, would seem a bit of a strange relationship. This, but can either of you explain how did you first come into contact, Elaine?
So we set up the programme back in 2019, and in 2020 we were looking to expand. So the way that the method that we used was to send out invites to local farmers. We knew which farms we'd already got signed up, and ideally we wanted contiguous land. The more contiguous land, as in, you know, adjoining land, we can get signed up and vaccinate the badgers, the more effective the vaccination is. So that's why in the area where Richard's farm is, we sent out invites to an information meeting, and I don't think I'd heard back from you, had I, Richard? And so, not one to give up easily, obviously. I think I phoned him, and it was, unfortunately, this is a terrible coincidence, but unfortunately it was on the day that Richard had notification that his cattle had come down with bovine TB. So a positive and a negative sort of coming together just by pure coincidence. So I went to the farm and we had a meeting. And it's fair to say that you had some reservations about the vaccination programme and whether it was effective. But we went through the information, and I went through sort of the scientific side of it, which is, you know, the you know, if you vaccinate 30% of the cubs, you know, 30% of the adults, 70% of the cubs will be protected. You know, the fact that if you can get 70-odd% of badgers vaccinated, it will vastly reduce the incidence of infections, and also the possibility of badgers excreting the disease as well and passing it on to cattle. So we went through the science, we went through the fact that some of his neighbours were already signed up to the programme, and therefore, you know, it's a good thing to do because, as I say, with this contiguous land, the more contiguous land we can have, it's a free service to farmers. Obviously, there's increasing financial pressures on farmers at the moment, but we've got the backing of DEFRA and the local council, which means that we can offer vaccination free of charge. So with all of this evidence and whatever, Richard decided that, yes, you know, he would go ahead. And not wanting to put words into his mouth, but we were just having a conversation before. But, you know, I think it's important to stress that farmers are always in control within this, so that it's farmers sign a land access agreement, you know, saying we can come onto their land.
Right.
Farmers give us a map showing us the land that we can have access to and vaccinate on. So we've got that. And then we always communicate with our farmers to say, right, so when's the best time to come? You know, whether it's crops, whether there's lambing going on, whatever's happening.
Right, okay.
So when's the best time for us to come and vaccinate? And then when we're going on the land, we will always let them know when we're on site and off. And that's really for a health and safety point of view as well, because all farmers will want to know, you know, who's on their land and what they're doing. So that was back in 2020. That first year, as I say, that was about July, wasn't it, 2020? We had to get Richard on the licence. You've just said what a complicated process it is. Badgers are a protected species, so Richard signs the paperwork, we get the map, then it's got to be put on our licence. So once we've got all of that done, it was quite late in the season by the time we got onto your land. And obviously badgers, not being stupid creatures, as the weather starts to change, they don't really want to come above ground. And also there's lots of food sources in the autumn. There's corn in the fields, there's acorns, there's berries.
So it's difficult to attract them with your proverbial peanuts.
Absolutely. They're going, do we need to go near that trap to get the peanuts? No, we'll just go in the field down the road.
Yeah.
So we did vaccinate some badgers that first year, but I knew there was more. We need to get 70% of the population vaccinated to get herd immunity.
Okay.
Just like with COVID vaccinations,
Right.
We need that herd immunity. So the following year, last year, 2021, we went earlier in the season and we were much more successful. I think we got about 15 badgers sort of around the farm. And that, we were pleased with that. But when we go back and vaccinate, we do go back, it's a 4-yearly cycle. So we will go back annually and vaccinate the population at every site. So that if we did miss one or two, when we go back in the consecutive years, then we will get those badgers there. And also the new cubs that are coming through as well. So, it is a tried and tested process. We are trained by Animal and Plant Health Agency in terms of vaccinating. We're regulated by Natural England, who come out and do compliance visits, and as I say, DEFRA fund us as well. So there's lots of paperwork to be filled in, lots of rigorous checks. So everything we do, is tried and tested, like I said. So would you agree, Richard, that sort of the communication and the process is quite a painless one?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a bit of an opportunity to draw breath, the two of you, and have a drink as well, because we've been through quite an emotive few minutes, I think, here. So what I'm going to do is play one of our proverbial jingles, which keeps us alive here at Radio Northwich, and we'll be straight back with Elaine Alexander and Richard, who has been telling the story about the problems that he's come across when they've contracted tuberculosis. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Okay. Well, welcome back to the programme, everybody. This is Mike Cooksley presenting the Northwich Now programme on Friday the 13th of May. And I'm talking with Elaine Alexander of the Cheshire Badger Vaccination programme, and Richard Fryer, who is a local farmer on whose land Elaine and her group have actually been vaccinating badgers over the last few years. Richard, if I can come back to you, in your view, has liaising with the badger group helped to reduce TB at your farm? How are things there at the moment?
So, as I said, we've been closed up with TB twice. The second time was in July 2020. It actually took us till October 2021 to go clear. We are clear now. How long we're going to go clear, stay clear for, no one knows. But it's got to be a good thing that we've got some vaccinated badgers around the farm now. It can't possibly make the situation any worse. It can only make it better. I would absolutely agree with everything Elaine said previously, that the way the process works, it is, not from my point of view, but from Elaine's, there's quite a lot of paperwork, quite laborious to get the licences, but they are protected species at the end of the day. I would also, the communication from all the volunteers and the team is fantastic. Every time any of them are coming onto the farm, I get a text message to say, coming on site at which bit and when they're leaving as well. So I know that where people are, and we've obviously got farming operations going on all the time. It's obviously a working farm, so we need to know where people are. We can't have any accidents or so that it's been very easy for me to become involved and to stay involved, because it's not cost me anything in my time or financially. We've got, like I say, vaccinated badgers on the farm now where we didn't have before. And they've as much right to be on the farm as we have at the end of the day. They're a wild animal. And you feel like you're doing something positive. I think one of the hard things is, when you've got TB, you can't do anything. If we have a lameness problem or a herd health problem, or we're short of forage or something like that, you can do something about it most of the time. You could come up with a plan to tackle that, whatever problem it is. We're quite resilient as farmers, very resilient, I'd say. But you're helpless with TB, absolutely helpless. There's nothing that you've done wrong while you've got it. You can't vaccinate your cattle. You can't do anything about it. So I think this felt like quite a positive thing. At least we were doing something, that was going to help the situation, hopefully. So I think I'd agree with everything Elaine says, and it can only have helped the situation on the farm.
Elaine, I know when you were in the studio last time, in the Radio Northwich studio, you said, and I asked you what your motivation was to start doing this, and you said, I believe at the time, something to the effect that it was regarding safeguarding badgers. But having done this, has it widened your appreciation of what the actual farming fraternity actually go through?
Absolutely. So yes, my motivation to begin with was to provide an alternative to culling. However, since working more closely with the farming community and seeing the impact of TB on these farms, it is devastating. I mean, devastating particularly for a dairy farm, I'd say, because they've got pedigree herds and which have been built up over generations, and for every animal that tests positive, it needs to go to slaughter, so that's lost. They do get some compensation from the government, but it's not enough. And you've heard from Richard just the financial impact as well as the emotional impact on this. So now I would definitely say, in the past I couldn't understand why farmers would turn to culling. I can now. I mean, I hope now that they would turn to vaccination because we're offering this alternative, and there are some advantages of vaccination over culling. But yes, it's having that insight into the pressures that a farm would be under. It is a dreadful situation, and when TB gets into a farm, it's very difficult to get rid of it because TB can infect any mammal. So whether you've got, your domestic cats, dogs, people, other livestock animals, they can all catch it. It can stay in the soil for 6 months, so it's very difficult to get rid of. So the other thing that I would urge, just doing a bit of a sales pitch, the other thing that I would urge farmers to do is, if your cattle are clear of TB at the moment, now is the time to vaccinate your badgers because the chances are they're clear of TB as well. Right. That cycle of infection hasn't started yet. So vaccinate your badgers. By vaccinating, you keep a clean, stable, healthy population of badgers. You know what's on your land. And then, I'm not saying it's the be-all and end-all in controlling TB. I know you asked Richard, since vaccinating the badgers did that sort of control the TB. I'd love to say that it's the be all and end all, vaccinate your badgers and that's the end of TB. It isn't, I've got to be honest, but it's a tool in the kit bag, and you can mitigate your risk, and I'm sure you're doing this, Richard, by doing the risk-based trading of your cattle, making sure that you do test the cattle before new cattle before they're moved in, raising food troughs and water troughs off the ground by at least 1 metre so badgers can't get in, putting the metal skirts on food stores, cattle food stores, so badgers can't get in there as well. So it's just one of a raft of measures, but from a farmer's point of view, it's an easy thing to do. We do all of the work. Once you've signed that bit of paper, we'll do all of the work behind the scenes. It is very unobtrusive. Because other than sort of the text message, you probably wouldn't know that we're out and about kind of thing. And the farmer's always in control. If the farmer has signed up and agreed to start on a certain date, but for whatever reason, perhaps they've got new cattle coming in or whatever, they need to change that date, we can be flexible. The farmer always has the last say in what we do.
I know that Richard said, just going back a little while back in the programme, Richard said that great thing is that there is no cost attributable to this as far as apart from the time, which is very small in liaising with you. How are you actually funded then? I know I probably asked you this at the last programme. How are you actually funded with regard to the vaccine and the various pieces of equipment? I mean, it really is. I mean, the other morning, I couldn't believe what a complex operation it was to actually go out and just do some vaccinating of the badgers. I'd assumed very foolishly that you just rolled up with a syringe, you tropped off down the field and bang, that was it. You know, got the badger in the trap, bang, that was it, cheerio, what have you. But it was nothing like that. It was tremendously complex with regard to, you know, making sure that everybody was doing everything correctly, that, you know, the health and safety aspect and what have you. So how are you actually funded?
So 50% of our funding comes from DEFRA. So back in 2019, we applied for the Badger Edge vaccination scheme funding, which is matched funding. So we got 50% funding from DEFRA, and then we approached the local council, which in Richard's case is Cheshire West.
Right.
And they also agreed to fund the other 50%. We also do some fundraising of our own. So this Sunday we'll be at Reese Heath Agricultural College with a stall there.
Okay.
But as I say, our funding mainly comes from DEFRA and the local council, which means that all the bits of kit that you saw the other morning, because unfortunately the vaccine needs to be kept chilled.
Yeah.
So we need the portable vaccine fridges. We need all of the disposables. We need to be gloved and masked. Partly to protect the badgers from COVID in this day and age, but also to protect us should the badger have TB as well. We will always have masks or whatever. You know, so it's all the bits of kit that you saw are funded by DEFRA, and we need to be trained as well, so that all of our vaccinators are trained by the Animal Plant Health Agency. As I say, Natural England will come out. Natural England is who holds our licence.
Right.
So they need to make sure that they come out and make sure that we're following all of the rules of our licence. And should we fall foul of that, which thank heavens so far we haven't, but you know, we risk losing our licence. So we're very careful to go by all of the rules of our licence.
How many, I probably asked you at the last programme, but just to refresh people's memories, how many of you are there?
So in terms of trained lay vaccinators, we've got 22. In terms of volunteers, because the vast majority of the work, once you've got the badger in the trap, that's the easy bit. You know, you vaccinate it, you walk away. The hard bit is putting the peanuts out, finding out where the badgers are, then putting the traps in, again putting the peanuts in the traps, getting the badgers used to coming close to the traps. And that whole process can take nearly 2 weeks. And, you know, sometimes it's over quite rough terrain. Sometimes you're having to carry the traps quite a long way.
Yeah.
Not that I want to obviously put off any new potential volunteers.
I was going to say, are you looking for volunteers?
We are always looking for new volunteers, because the more volunteers that we have, the more land we can sign up.
Okay.
So at the beginning of this year, we did do a big recruitment campaign, and we're just going through the training of those new volunteers now. But we're very happy to take on new volunteers at any time.
Right. Richard, you've been very positive about, you know, the impact that this has had on you. But when the government announced it would not be issuing any more licences for intensive culling, the NFU's Deputy President, Stuart Roberts, said, and I'm just going to quote this as well, I found this on the NFU website a few days ago. He said, every farmer wants to make his strategy a success and ensure it delivers a tuberculosis-free England. However, the pursuit of unproven and untested methods, such as badger and cattle vaccinations, is irresponsible and could lead to the further spread of this disease at a time when the current strategy is making inroads in tackling it. That would seem to go completely against what you've said as regards the benefits that have accrued to you. I just wonder whether, you know, you'd like to make a comment about that.
I don't know what I can add to that, really. That's obviously Stuart's view. I'm not going to disagree with what he said. I think, as Elaine has said, I think culling and vaccination are just tools in the toolbox that we need to use.
A part of the whole raft of things that
to try and you know, get this TB under control. You know, you've got to roll back a bit really, that in the 70s and early 80s, TB just wasn't really a problem. You know, it'd been almost eradicated, and you know, you've got generations now of failure at government and ministry level to let this problem get like it is, and it's a massive problem. Last year, in 2020, there was 28,000 cattle culled in England alone.
Really?
That's over 70 a day, every single day. So it's a huge problem, and it should never have been allowed to get to the stage it is now. So I wouldn't disagree with what he said, and I wouldn't. I think, like I say, you need to use every tool that we've got really, and you know, to try and get this under control, because it's a huge issue. And I think cattle vaccination, you know, has been something that's been talked about since I was at college, which is, you know, longer ago than I care to remember really. And you know, I hope that is something that can be rolled out, because you know, we vaccinate our cattle for, you know, all sorts of viruses and diseases, and if we could get a proper vaccination for the cattle.
So is the intention finally to actually produce an anti-bovine TB vaccine for cattle?
That would be amazing, because, you know, we know where all our cattle are. They've all got passports, we know where they all are. So we can vaccinate every single animal on our farm for whatever we want, for vaccines that are currently available, of course. So if we could vaccinate the cattle for TB, then this problem is going to go away quite quickly, because the cattle, if it worked, if we could get a vaccine that worked, and that's still being developed, hopefully, then TB wouldn't be an issue to us then. And that's got to be the goal really, and to become TB clear as you know, as an individual and as a country as well.
And you'd be redundant, Elaine.
Absolutely. I mean,
which I'm sure you'd be delighted.
Yeah, I would. So I'm sure there would be sort of some crossover, you know, sort of we would continue with badger vaccination as the new vaccine comes in. The new vaccine is being tested currently.
Right.
The target date is 2025 for the launch of the vaccine.
Okay.
So, you know, there is that date in sight. But yeah, I think there would be some crossover. And if it means that in 2025 I can sit back, put my feet up and just retire, happy days, I would say.
Not the same for you, Richard. You've just got to carry on working. But by the sounds of it, it's a very rewarding job that you've got.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, I mean, like every job, it has its peaks and troughs, but you just hope there's more peaks than troughs, really, and most of the time there is. And you know, like I said to you, I've never wanted to do anything else, and yeah, particularly this time of year, you know, it's already light when you get up in the morning. Going to fetch the cows up for milking in the morning is just a great job at this time of year.
Fantastic. Good. Well, thanks both of you for coming on the programme. Really appreciate it again. Thanks. Elaine, you just wanted to say something, in conclusion? Carry on.
Yes, if there are any local farmers that would like to get in touch, then we are looking to recruit more farmers and landowners. So if they would like to get in touch with me...
How can they do that?
So they could email me at elaine@cbvp.org.uk.
Yep.
We've also got our website, cbvp.org.uk, and we've also got Facebook. Contact us through any of those methods. We would be delighted to come and meet with you or organise a call and just discuss in a little bit more detail what's involved. However, if farmers would like to know a bit more about what's involved before they speak to us, then again they can Google TB Hub, which is a mine of information on all things TB, including badger vaccination.
Let me have those links. As I said to you when you did the last programme, we'll put it on our Facebook page on Sunday. Give me all of those 3 links. I think that's quite important. The one for the farmers, if you don't mind your email address going out live. The information from the TB site, I think, would be extremely useful as well. Richard, before we finish, anything you'd like to say to the listeners? Apart from drink more milk.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Keep drinking plenty of milk, and all, you know, all dairy products have, you know, do take a bashing from time to time, but you know, it's you know, milk, cheese, they're great wholesome foods, and eat and drink plenty of them.
Fantastic. Listen, both of you, thanks very much for coming on the program. I know time is very precious to you, but for you particularly, Richard, I know you've got to dash back and do the milking in a couple of hours. I imagine something like that. Thanks very much. I'm sure our listeners have. I've certainly enjoyed the interview. It's great to see the two of you sat here in together. I think both supporting one another in what in your aims and what you're actually achieving. So, Richard, thanks to you from all our listeners and from the team here at Radio Northwich. Elaine, thanks to you as well. I'm sure we'll probably have you on the programme at some future time. Thanks very much and take care.
Thank you.